France has just released its UFO files. This is huge. The U.S. just released its UAP task force report, but almost everything in that report was classified. The classified version of that report was 10 times longer than the unclassified version. So what would that unclassified version look like? Did they go into any historical instances? If this was a real report looking into the totality of the UFO/UAP phenomenon, what would it look like? Well, France's report gives us a few clues because it is an historical report. The information coming out of France goes back 60, 70 years. So we actually have a lot of historical data to look at in this release. It's amazing. This is the first time I've seen an official government historical data, and I want to go over this with you because to me this is really huge. We're actually getting information about UFOs that have been compiled by a government over a long period of time, so we can see general trends in a way that we could not see in specific instances. Before I get into it, please hit like, please subscribe, and if you do, please hit the bell next to it to be notified of future videos. And as I'm going through this, please comment below and let me know what you think. Okay, let's get into it. French Space Agency releases information about UFOs, 600 cases over 64 years. Reporting to France's space agency is a little-known unit that investigates the unidentified aerial phenomenon and makes its findings public. U.A.P. is the name of the group, but it's in French, and so I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce it. While everyone is focused on the American version of the study, which will contain over 120 events, U.A.P. has released a report that covers over 600 recorded incidents by pilots over a 64-year period. The paper concentrates on 290 of these incidents when the unidentified aerial device had or may have had an impact on flight safety. While the study has received little attention, there are several data points that are essential in establishing or verifying particular aspects of the phenomena. It will be fascinating to see if the DNI's report to Congress has comparable results, or if they will disclose these findings in the public realm. Spoiler, they won't. 1952 and 1954, the peak years. This is interesting. The distribution of the 600 cases by year reveals that 320 instances occurred over a 16-year period from 46 to 60, with 275 cases occurring between 50 and 57. That's almost half the cases. The year with the most instances, 83 cases, was 1952, followed by 54 with 40 cases. The years 1952 in the United States and 1954 in Europe are regarded as the two peak years for UAP sightings. Now that is very significant, I think, because the UFO flyover of Washington, D.C. occurred in 1952. That was a big deal. We still don't know what that was all about or what the ramifications of that were. Did that result in a meeting between the president and the visitors? What was that about? Was that about the military targeting UFOs and shooting at them, and the UFOs having to knock them out of the sky and kill pilots or vanish them? Was this a warning to not pursue and shoot at them? What was that all about, that 1952 incident, the UFO flyover of Washington, D.C., and how did that correspond to the peak years of UFO sightings in worldwide, apparently? I think that's really fascinating and really interesting. It also touches on something I've been wondering for a while. Is the activity increasing in pace, or has it always been this pace, or is it even decreasing? This report would argue that it may be decreasing, that the peak years were in the 50s. I'm not sure if I quite buy that, but I think that's really interesting and significant. Okay, let's continue. It says there is no discernible seasonal trend in the distribution of these 600 cases per month. July has the most instances compared to other months, and April has the fewest cases. The remaining 10 months had between 42 and 56 instances, which does not appear to be a substantial difference. Witnesses failed to indicate the time of day in 38 cases. Out of the remaining 562 occurrences, over 50% occurred at night, and less than 50% occurred during the day. It's a global phenomenon. The 600 instances are almost universally dispersed. They were positioned over continental zones, encompassing 56 nations, as well as above marine zones. The American continent, with North America having almost 300 instances, 108 instances have been reported above Europe, with 33 of them occurring in French airspace. The UAP sightings recorded by military pilots are the most common among the 600 occurrences documented during a 64-year period. When the latter section of the time range investigated is included, the outcome is completely different. The commercial aircraft instances are the most frequent of the 70. 49 in total, that's 70%. Military pilots reported 12 instances, only 17%, while private pilots reported 9 cases, 13%. This, I believe, is related to the secrecy that armies throughout the world have taken when it comes to disclosing UAP sightings. A thorough study of the distribution of military aircraft cases by year reveals that 75% of them happened during a 14-year period from 46 to 59. The majority of these instances were military cases from the 50s, and numerous official records from that time period were declassified in the years that followed. They're talking about Blue Book and Grudge. The distribution of incidents by flight phase reveals that the vast majority of sightings happened when the aircraft was in cruise flight. It should be noted that the pilot has more time to look at the sky during this phase of flight because the aircraft is frequently on autopilot. So that's a common refrain. How do you find UFOs? Look at the sky. Of the 600 cases chosen, a radar check was performed in almost half of them. Pilots classify the things they see into two categories: light points and objects, which have a solid appearance. UAP reported by pilots and crews is described as having a material or three-dimensional solid aspect in over 3/4 of the instances. That's 74%. UAP is described as solid, although it is most commonly reported as objects, which come in a variety of forms. The most commonly reported forms are round or elliptical with a metallic appearance. Meanwhile, several additional forms were noticed, some of which were quite odd and contradictory to traditional aerodynamic designs. Examples: 2 yellow objects shaped like hamburgers, I guess that's kind of saucer-like, a black cylindrical object 24 feet long and 9 feet wide, a giant triangle shape with intense lights joining the edges, a long brown cigar-shaped object, an airliner fuselage without any wings, that's another cigar shape, an elliptical shape, flat below and slightly domed on the upper part, a large elliptical object looking like a metallic mushroom, that's a little different, which at times appeared to be translucent and seemed to have a transparent glass-like dome. In more than 2/3 of the 600 selected cases, the witnesses have reported only one UAP. In 20% of the cases, pilots reported sightings of 2 or more UAP. In 12 cases, groups of more than 10 UAP were observed at the same time. A pilot recorded the lowest estimated altitude as 500 feet. Interaction cases are those in which the UAP appears to react to the presence of an aircraft. Interactions between UAP and aircraft were observed in almost 300 incidences, that's about 50%. These cases are about the following events: UAP conducts maneuvers to approach, chase, or escape from the aircraft. 2. Dogfights with military aircraft. And 3. UAP circles or performs maneuvers near to the aircraft. This category includes reports of electromagnetic impacts on aviation systems. It's very interesting that they use the word dogfight. Do they mean literal fighting, or do they mean in the sense that Commander David Fravor is said to have engaged in a dogfight with the Tic Tac? Of course, there were no shots exchanged. It wasn't hostile, but they were kind of maneuvering around each other in a vaguely dogfightish way. So it's very unclear from this phrasing whether they mean a violent encounter or not. It does say that in 59 of the incidents, the UAP circled or moved close to the aircraft. This sort of occurrence has the most reports, 20 cases, of suspected electromagnetic impacts on aviation equipment, particularly for commercial, 8 cases in private aircraft. Aggressive Tic Tacs. In terms of events that may have an influence on flight safety, the most common kind reported by commercial pilots is UAP approaches aircraft on a collision course with a total of 38 instances. The pilots claim that the UAP circles aircraft and or moves close to aircraft in 24 occasions. Pilots most commonly reported claimed electromagnetic impacts on their aircraft systems during this sort of occurrence. In 15 cases, the pilot had to take evasive action to avoid a collision with the object that resulted in passengers injured in 3 cases. That is so weird. You would think these things could maneuver around airplanes. So it's almost like they're deliberately forcing the airplanes to maneuver around them. What does that mean? That is so weird. Are they just trying to get attention or provoke a reaction or some sort of, filing, trying to raise awareness? Here's an example. The 3 crew members saw an extremely rapid white rocket-like object overflowing their plane between 200 and 400 feet above in the opposite direction. The item, which they characterized as cylindrical, lacked a wing. There was no TCAS warning. The object just flew above their head. It was close enough that the flight officer lowered his head, fearing it might strike them. It was white and spherical in form. There was no apparent smoke or flames coming from the item. They observed no radar echo in the aircraft's opposite direction. Private aircraft instances with potential influence on flight safety account for the majority of the cases, accounting for 34 of the 64 cases in which pilots reported claimed electromagnetic impacts on aircraft systems. Instances involving private aircraft account for over half of all cases, compared with commercial aircraft cases, 15%, and military aircraft cases, 27%. Electromagnetic effects. The most troublesome element of UAP contacts appear to be situations in which permanent or transitory electromagnetic impacts occurred on aircraft systems during flight, either directly or indirectly, as a result of the relatively close presence of one or more UAP. In 81 of the 600 chosen cases, claimed electromagnetic interference was seen and reported, 14%. Everything from radios to weaponry was impacted. Readers should remember this information and realize that studies that have gone to great efforts to assist us in figuring out the nature of the UAP enigma already exist. That is huge. They've been studied by reputable organizations staffed by qualified scientists and professionals, and they have been doing this for a long time. Just imagine what the U.S. government has on these objects. So there you have it. That's France's information, at least what they can reveal publicly about UAP, including historical data, even globally, even global trends in this data, including whether the UAP has a significant presence in a certain month or year, how they operate, what the exact statistics are, how they affect radar and electromagnetic systems. There is a wealth of data here and some really interesting results that I think everybody should take a look at. And it really highlights if France has this information, how much do we have? How much does the United States have? Clearly, one would assume they have a lot. So we have been lied to. This information has been suppressed. The UAP Task Force report, while interesting, is clearly just the tip of the iceberg on what the government knows. I think probably even the report they gave to Congress, the classified version, was only the tip of the iceberg. So this information has been studied and cataloged by somebody in the government. Area 51, the breakaway group, call them what you will, but there must be a large body within the government, probably highly compartmentalized, and possibly a lot of that is now in the private sector, that has been dealing with this issue and that has this information. And if France, this little known French agency, has all this information going back to the 60s, just imagine what that group has. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. Comment below and let me know what you think. Were you as impressed by these findings as I was? Also, please consider hitting the subscribe button, and if you do, the bell next to it to be notified of future videos. Until next time, Cosmic Road out.